I don't know if you can hear us, but just wanted to say good morning.
Kind of a mystery Zoom, isn't it? You never quite know.
And good morning, Charlotte.
Leah's looking at the screen. That's a good sign. Oh, you're
Good morning.
Hi.
Oh, you want to show them the sticker? Here you go. You can show everybody the sticker.
Ooh.
Put it in the camera. Like that.
Is that,
what's that?
It's a camel. We have
Is it
camel sticker.
It's a camel sticker.
What else have we got? All the treasures on Mama's desk. What's this one?
So I put a link in the chat that has the poem plus the reflection questions. And Rosalind was with me the first time I did this style of meditation. But for folks who this is new, this is a style of meditation that comes out of the tradition of Lectio Divina, or the divine reading. And how you practice it is you read a piece. Typically it's done with scripture or holy texts. I like to do it with poetry, and you read a single piece or a single verse multiple times. And each time you read it, it invites you deeper into the work and deeper into yourself. And so I share the link so all of you can have the words yourself and you can follow along. And I'm going to read the poem out loud. So you'll be able to read it while I read it, and I will frame each time we read it, I'll frame it with I will frame it with the reflection question for each moment. But before we just dive in, I want to give us a moment. I want to invite you to settle into your seat. Maybe feel both your feet on the ground, your seat in the chair. Take a moment to find your breath. Feel the air entering your lungs through your nose or your mouth. Feel the space created as your lungs expand. Feel the space remaining as you exhale. And I invite us just to take a few moments to breathe. Our breath is our reminder that we are here in this moment. Our breath is the first prayer our body learns to pray. And so we enter into a moment of reflection, of meditation, and of sacred conversation. And as you breathe this breath, may the space created by it be filled with the words of the poet Wendell Berry. As I read this poem, in the first reading of it, I want to invite you to just allow yourself to meet the poem. Allow the words to meet your ears, catch your eyes, and just notice what line or word catches your attention. And invite that word or line to offer you something. This is How to Be a Poet by Wendell Berry. Make a place to sit down. Sit down. be quiet. You must depend upon affection, reading, knowledge, skill, more of each than you have. Inspiration, work, growing older, patience, for patience joins time to eternity. Any readers who like your poems doubt their judgment. Breathe with unconditional breath the unconditioned air. Shun electric wire. Communicate slowly. Live a three-dimensioned life. Stay away from screens. Stay away from anything that obscures the place it is in. There are no unsacred places. There are only sacred places and desecrated places. Accept what comes from silence. Make the best you can of it. Of the little words that come out of the silence like prayers, prayed back to the one who prays. Make a poem that does not disturb the silence from which it came. I invite you, we're going to take a moment and I'm going to invite you all to share what word or line caught your attention. And you can share it in the chat. You can speak it out loud. There's a small group of us today, so we can do it a little free form, which is nice. Oh, Diane, I think you're on mute. Oh. Oh, Diane, your audio is a little skewed. I can't fully hear you. It sounds kind of like a chipmunk. I don't know if that's the same for other people, but that's what.
No, she sounds like that to me too.
I guess this is where we're supposed to shine the
Oh,
electric wire.
Oh, now it's just quiet. I am
that's
so
weird.
sorry.
I've never heard that before.
I can't troubleshoot from here. I'm so sorry. Diane, maybe try leaving the Zoom and coming back in, and maybe that will reset. Just a second.
Okay, is this any better?
There we
Yay.
go.
Okay, all right. What struck me first was unconditional air.
Hmm.
I mean, it's such a simple but mind-blowing concept. I'd never thought of that. There's no condition to breathing. You breathe and the air is unconditional. I love Wendell Berry. That's the reason. Aside from just knowing you better, Nathan, I really like Wendell Berry. How about
Thank
you, Rosalind? Did something strike you?
Yeah, well, just the first two lines immediately resonated because I have a space where I go and I sit and I read, and it's just a very comfortable seat, and it's in a corner, and it has light behind it, and it immediately made me think of the place where I sit down to be quiet.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't. Nathan, when you read it next time, could you move the poem up as you're reading? Because I can't see the bottom half.
Oh, yes.
Hmm.
That would be great. So I can't remember what was in the second half. I think there was something which read, oh, it's the thing about screens, of course. But
Yeah.
when was this written?
This was written in, I believe, oh, I wonder if the link will tell me. I want to say it was in the 90s.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, as recent as that. Okay. So
Yeah.
it screens, I was thinking what screens he would have known of at that time. Interesting.
Yeah. I love this poem, and I love reading this poem and doing work with this poem in Zoom, in part because when I read that line of stay away from screens, I just feel the irony of like living in a moment where screens are almost inescapable.
And that's
Here we
true,
are on
isn't it?
screens.
Yeah.
And here we are on screens. And Leah added in the chat as what resonated, there are no unsacred places,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
which is one of my favorite lines as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Rosalind, so the link I shared you should be able to scroll through it yourself.
Oh, so I can. Sorry, I didn't even.
Yes.
I just assumed it was your screen. Of course, it's my screen. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Are you looking at your phone or the big screen?
In
I'm on the
in the
computer.
in the chat, I gave everyone a copy of the
In the
document.
chat. Okay.
Diane, I'll reshare it since you just joined in the chat reset.
Okay, there it is. There it is.
Yeah. So if you want to read along or if you just want to listen.
Oh, kind of do both, huh?
Yeah. So I want to invite us as that first reading invited us just to sit in what caught our attention. This second reading, as you listen to it, ask yourself, what is the wisdom of this poem? What is this poem offering me in terms of wisdom? And there's no right or wrong answers. It's what is wisdom for you? And so I want to invite us to take another breath and recenter, feeling the air enter our body, the unconditional breath in unconditional air. And invite the space created to hold these words once again. Make a place to sit down, be quiet. You must depend upon affection, reading, knowledge, skill, more of each than you have. Inspiration, work, growing older, patience. For patience joins time to eternity. Any readers who like your poems, doubt their judgment. Breathe with unconditional breath, the unconditioned air. Shun electric wire. Communicate slowly. Live a three-dimensioned life. Stay away from screens. Stay away from anything that obscures the place it is in. There are no unsacred places. There are only sacred places and desecrated places. Accept what comes from silence. Make the best of it you can. Of the little words that come out of the silence, like prayers, prayed back to the one who prays. Make a poem that does not disturb the silence from which it came. I invite you to just take a moment and ask, what is the wisdom of this poem for you? And whoever feels called to share first, the floor is yours.
listening to the inner voice is a value for me because I am a person who meditates. And listening to that voice and accepting what comes from silence has been a theme of my life since early childhood. And that doesn't, you know, some people think that's a kind of magical thing, but I think the voice within, as my mother used to say, it's your conscience. It's your conscience guiding you. There's more than one theme in Wendell Berry's poem that he separates sacred lands from desecrated lands. It doesn't allow for anything in between. And I think that's something that requires some thinking, because it really says that all places are or were sacred, some no longer. It's an environmental statement, it's a spiritual statement, but it puts it in these terms that are so black and white. It's either sacred or desecrated. And there's a sadness in that.
I don't see that as sad. I think that's actually everything's special, everything's sacred, but you can
Mhm.
spoil it, I guess. I'm not quite sure what he means by.
Well, what of the desecrated spaces? How would you define desecrated spaces?
For me, desecrated spaces, I read those lines and I feel the sadness, but I also know that if something is desecrated, it can be brought back to being sacred.
Mm.
That desecration is not a state of permanence.
That's a very optimistic view, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I think it reminds me to be fully present, which is easier said than done. But to sort of be fully part of life, be quiet, absorb it, stay away from things which take away from the fullness of life. Yes. What do you think he means by any readers who like your poems doubt their judgment?
I always read it as a joke.
Yeah.
Like it feels like a moment of humor to me, that like every artist knows that the people who say good things about your work, you're like, that's not the voice I should listen to. So
Indeed.
for me, it always feels like a tongue-in-cheek moment of like,
Yeah.
I must doubt my judgment then, because I've always liked his poems. How to be a poet.
and I think for me, one of the things I love about this poem and what caught my attention this time in particular is in the first stanza where it says, you must depend upon, and he just starts listing things. And then in the middle of his list, he interjects more of each than you have.
Mm-hmm.
That part of this work of creating and writing and living that three-dimensioned life is, oh, you never actually have enough.
Yeah.
But that doesn't prohibit you from participating and attempting and doing.
Interesting, the last one in the list is patience. There's never enough, probably.
I think I have enough of growing older.
Well, Well, that one's after where he says more.
Yeah, that
than
one's
you
after
have.
the enough.
Yeah, I have enough of that.
Yeah,
And
that's interesting,
enough of
isn't it, where
work.
he puts that phrase, because
Mm,
like maybe you always have enough inspiration, enough work, maybe too much, enough growing
mm.
older. Maybe, patience, I don't know. Maybe not enough patience. Maybe more than you
Oh my
thought.
God. Patience overflows with me. I mean, that's a part of having teenagers living in your home. And even teenagers who are pretending to be almost 60. Yeah, it takes a lot of patience.
That would take a lot of patience. Yes.
And and I'm learning I'm pretty skillful at that. And when I lose my patience, I lose it in the quiet of my own space where I can talk to myself about it, and maybe even do a primal scream. Patience didn't come naturally for me, but certainly I've learned a lot of it lately.
I don't think it comes naturally to many people. I guess there are some people you meet who just seem to have an abundance of patience, but I'm not one of those. Yeah. So
I'm not the same here.
yeah, it's time to acquire lots of practice, I guess. I like that. Patience joins time to eternity.
Hmm. Yeah. Huge thought.
Now that feels optimistic to me.
Oh, really?
What in what way? How do you mean,
I think
Nathan?
and maybe it's not optimism. I think there's like when I always first read those words, it feels like this like really profound, beautiful truth. But when I think about the experience of being patient and that feeling of impatience makes things that are not eternity feel like eternity.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Conversely, yes.
That those moments where it's like, oh, I want these things to feel like to come sooner. I'm being so impatient that time itself feels like it's taking longer.
Oh,
Do you think he means that if you're patient, time kind of slows down, and maybe that's why it can go on forever?
I think so. That it brings, I think, yeah. I like that, Rosalind.
I don't quite know what it means, but I just
well, time
Yeah.
is such a difficult concept, really. I mean, today, for instance, going back to a daylight savings time, waking up and thinking it's 6 a.m. and the dawn is just beginning and finding out it's really 7 o'clock. I think it takes a lot of patience
Yeah.
to get past that shock of how we manipulate time.
And I think this poem in a lot of ways is that, because you have the patience joins time to eternity, and you have only sacred places and desecrated places, which is a playing with time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then the last stanza has this like, the last stanza is my favorite stanza in the poem. Particularly it says, of the little words that come out of the silence, like prayers prayed back to the one who prays.
Mm-hmm.
That silence prays for you just as much as you're praying in silence.
Mm-hmm.
And that the words of poetry or the words of the divine are the little prayers prayed back to you.
Yeah, like a gift.
And that feels like there's something to do with time there, but I don't have all the words.
Yes, it does have something to do with time because there's more than 3 dimensions. I mean, it's just in the silence, the words that come back from silence don't seem to come from oneself,
Mhm.
although my training is that it does.
Yeah.
It's a kind of higher power connected with a sense of timelessness, really, that time is just a fiction, and that in silence all of one's experience is there. It's accessible. Time past, time future, time present. In silence, they are all there. Multi-dimensional experience of life. It's an incredible elation. It certainly helps me to peel away disappointments that may occur during the day if I'm meditating at night, which I often do when the sun goes down. I sometimes meditate when the sun comes up. And there is a connection with the universe. He even says in the stanza before, live a three-dimensional life. Silence sometimes to me, although I expressed it in three dimensions, as though past, present, and future is certainly three dimensions, but it seems to me that in silence, there are more dimensions than three.
Mm.
It kind of speaks to the limitation of our perception, the limitations of being human.
Mm.
Silence and the little words that come out of silence, like prayers. This is a poem worth reading many more times than once. Isn't that true?
Mhm.
I think for me, three-dimension life means fully, stay away from things which just reduce you to a picture or a sound or whatever, but live fully and and quietly. And then in the silence, things come to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you take the time and the patience and try and be fully present. And then out of that quietness and silence, things will come back to you.
Certainly. Certainly.
And it is the task of the poet to not disturb the silence.
Mm-hmm.
Just to
With-
wait and see what comes out of it, maybe.
And that what comes out of it also should not disturb the silence from which it came.
Hmm.
Those last two lines of make a poem, and how the irony of that poetry is a genre that's designed to be spoken, to literally disturb silence.
Yeah.
But the poem should not disturb the silence from which it came. And yeah.
And all of that requires patience. Every bit of it.
Mm.
Being silent, for one, listening, and not disturbing the silence from which the poem comes. God,
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
I want to invite us to move into the third reading, which is our last reading of, and I think when many people think of meditation, they think of quietly just internally processing. And I approach this as a collective meditation, that our conversation is a meditation.
Mm.
And for our third reading, the invitation is, as you listen and read, ask yourself, where does this poem connect you to the sacred, to the universe, to God, to love, to the higher power in your life, in the language of your life? I'm not here to prescribe. You have to connect to insert this thing here. But how does this poem connect you to that which you would call mystery, divine, sacred, universe, God, love?
Well, that's what I believe that I expressed when in the silence there seemed to be more than 3 dimensions. And the dimensions, plural, beyond 3 dimensions, kind of like a definition of higher power to me, to the universe, and whatever is meant by God, but certainly what is meant by love. In the silence, I can experience a love without bounds, not coming from me necessarily, but from the universe that I feel during those times of silence when I'm listening. When past, present, and future seem like the same thing, and they seem like far beyond 3 dimensions. I think for me, that is when I'm experiencing the ultimate in love and what others might express by this word God, which has become less and less meaningful a term for me as I grow older. But a universal feeling of love is what seems to have replaced that term. The term God is just too temporal.
As I read this the last time, I invite you to rest in that unconditional love.
I love it. Mhm.
Make a place to sit down. Sit down. Be quiet. You must depend upon affection, reading, knowledge, skill, more of each than you have. Inspiration, work, growing older, patience. For patience joins time to eternity. Any readers who like your poems doubt their judgment. Breathe with unconditional breath, the unconditioned air. Shun electric wire. Communicate slowly. Live a 3-dimensioned life. Stay away from screens. Stay away from anything that obscures the place it is in. There are no unsacred places. There are only sacred places and desecrated places. Accept what comes from silence. Make the best you can of it, of the little words that come out of the silence like prayers, prayed back to the one who prays. Make a poem that does not disturb the silence from which it came. Diane shared how it connects her to unconditional love, to God, or not to God, but to the universe, to silence. Rosalind, I'm curious, how does this poem connect you to that which you would consider?
Well, I guess the experience of sitting quietly, breathing, being fully present, being away from any distraction, that feeling of being in the moment just reminds me of mindfulness and the experience of meditation. And I think for those who meditate very regularly, and I can't say I'm one of them, Although I do meditate sometimes, that sort of inner inner depth that inner connection that it produces, and I think people who meditate very regularly get this often. There's that sense of connection to more than where you are, to more than just sitting in your chair or whatever. And I think I kind of subscribe to the idea of God being within, that we all have some of the divine. And I don't see God as an outward force or anything like that, but I think we all have something divine in us. And I think, you touch that or you connect more with that when you, in those moments of stillness and quiet and away from everything else, and just sort of see and feel what comes from it. So I guess that's how I feel about it. How about you, Nathan?
I share the directive of the opening two lines of make a place to sit down, be quiet. And those are the only actions, really, like physical actions in the entire poem, is like sit down, be quiet, breathe, and accept what happens. And when I think about my relationship with the sacred, poetry has always been the site of that connection for me, even when I was still more religious and I grew up Catholic, and it was never the Bible stories that made me feel. It was always the Psalms. It was always the Proverbs. It was always the prayers, which prayers always feel like poems to me. And so I think for me, like what connects me to the sacred in this is that like, oh, this isn't, the title of the poem is How to Be a Poet, but it really, for me, it feels like how to pray.
Yeah.
And this is how you connect. And I also share a similar orientation of like that the sacred is within each individual person. And so to have that last stanza where the silence within you that you sit in when you pray prays back to you is just a very sweet, like almost, it just like that relationship with the divine. That it's not just like some other like fully out there detached from me, but actually we have this relationship. I create space and silence and I pray, and then the silence creates space and prays back to me. And sometimes it turns into a poem, which is a lovely gift, but oftentimes it's, I just gotta sit in a space of connection.
I guess prayers are like poems, aren't they? Especially old ones. I mean, they have the kind of, sometimes they might put people off who don't, the conventional religious thing. But, if you take them for what they are, as opposed to attached to a particular religion or something, I mean, they often have great beauty because they're often very old and so on.
My parents' dog is in my office with me, so I'm going to let it out because he just decided.
We've got Trudy here too. I don't know if she can hear us. Trudy joined in.
Yes, and
yes, I can hear you. I'm still
hi,
running on
Trudy.
yesterday's time because I didn't change my class. So I'm really not awake yet.
I'm wondering how I get the pictures back.
Yeah.
I want to see you without losing you.
Well, because I just got up, I haven't turned my picture on.
Oh. Well, I'm looking at the Wendell Berry poem.
Oh.
Welcome, Trudy. I'm going to put the document in the chat that has our poem. The meditation, we just actually are coming to the close of it. But the document I just shared with you has the poem plus the reflection questions that's been holding us. So I invite you to save this, and it is a thing that all of us can do on our own. I'm very sorry that our timing worked out this way.
It's the clock that did it.
Yeah,
I 100%.
Trudy didn't realize.
Yeah.
Well, I
Well, we'll
realized,
change it.
but I got up really late. I finished a book late last night.
That'll do it.
And I will say, Trudy, this is not the last time we'll be doing poetic meditation.
I'm so glad to hear that, Nathan. This has been
Yeah.
really beautiful,
I like this too. Yeah.
exceptional, if I must say.
What attracted me in was that I don't know that much about Wendell Berry's poetry, but there's a couple I have posted up on my bulletin board.
Mm.
Yeah, this is the poem we worked with today is titled How to Be a Poet, and is less about being a poet and more about being a person and someone in connection with all that life has to offer.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? I just realized the title, and I guess that was more specific. How waiting for inspiration, how poetry to come to him, I guess. But yeah, it seems much broader than that.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by in the fourth line, he says the first word he says is affection. You must depend upon affection, reading knowledge, skill, etc. That's
And more of each
interesting.
than you
That,
have.
feels like reciprocal feeling, love from others, and the other ones feel more like internal things. But it's interesting that he puts that as the first thing.
Yeah. Hello, Bob. Welcome. Oh, you're on mute. I'm so sorry. I think I can unmute. Oh no, I can't.
Bob, you're muted. I don't think he heard.
There may be quite a few others who will be joining us because, like me, they didn't.
Oh yeah.
Bob, you're coming in just at the end of the meditation. I'm gonna drop in the chat. I have a link to the document that has the poem and the reflection questions. So I invite you to save it. Please use this in your own practice. It's great for journaling or even just sitting in silence and reading the poem a few times and just allowing, as Wendell Berry says, the little words to come out of the silence. I'm just going to invite, as we're coming to a close, I want to invite us to just take a moment to come back to center. I want to invite us to place our feet, if you are able, firmly on the ground, to feel your body in your chair. I invite you to take a moment to find your breath. This can be as deep or as shallow as you need to breathe in this moment. There is no wrong way to breathe. And as you breathe, we will hold a moment of silence and allow the little words prayed back to you be the blessing as this space comes to a close. And when you are ready, I invite you to open your eyes, take notice of your space. Thank you for those who came. For those who joined us at the very end, I'm so sorry. And also, this is not the last time we'll be doing this. We'll be doing more of these poetry meditations. And I'll be collecting all the versions of it. So I have all of these on file. So if there's ever a moment you're like, oh, Nathan, I really love that poem we read. Do you still have it accessible? I will have everything on file.
Thank you.
And if you have if you find a poem that you're like, I would love to offer this, please. I'm always looking for new poetry, and I have my tried and trues, but if there's ever a moment of you're like, oh, I'd love for us to meditate on this poem, please send me poetry.
Are you a poet, Nathan?
I am.
Ah,
I'm currently working on my first chapbook, which is a form of poetry where it's about 40 pages long. So it's not a full collection, but I'm working on it.
cool.
Yeah, thank you. And with that, the service begins at 10:30. For folks who travel, I wanted to give you ample time to get to the fellowship if you were journeying. If not, the space this is done. I don't know how to, I don't want to just be like, bye and leave the meeting. But
Thank you, Nathan. That was
Yeah.
great. That was lovely. I enjoyed it
Thank
again
you.
very much.
Looking forward to the next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You bet. You're welcome.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.